dive into 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Miglash for the WDMA. We're going to be talking about lifetime value today, but I attended or a part of a direct marketing 101 or direct mail 101 from SQL Response yesterday. I did say hello to Patrick Carroll while I was there, so he can vouch for me. But I was in a Culver's that didn't have Wi-Fi, and I would have used up a month's worth of, I think, a month's worth of data just trying to watch the webinar. So I'm going to watch the recorded version, but I watched about the first 10 minutes, and in there they said direct mail was a dinosaur. And then they went on to show how complicated it was in Jurassic Park to recreate the dinosaurs. And so we have a little clip of Jurassic Park today as one of the funniest commercials ever. And so the scientist is trying to get away from Tyrannosaurus Rex. Here he goes. He's getting chased in his Jeep. Here it comes. Let's try to get good shots of the dinosaurs.
How do you like it now, my friend?
Would you like to take it for a test drive?
I just did.
Would you like to take a test drive? I just did. In your head. Which is where those dinosaurs are. And the webinar was going on to explain that direct marketing, direct mail was very sophisticated and very powerful, like a big dinosaur. I think I'm going to watch the recorded version and I will fill you in later. Okay, and I want to remind you that we're going to have a WDMA meetup on Tuesday at 3 p.m. And those are always fun. We have about 24 people registered. Maybe not quite that much, but I'm going to send out an email today, and I'll probably send another one on Tuesday just to remind everybody. That's about as much as I ever do. So anyway, now let's get over to some of the real news. Let's see. PDFs. This is from Yahoo. It's just really a press release from Business Wire. But anyway, well, it's nice that Yahoo picks it up. Managed Direct Response announces increase in direct mail production for nonprofit organizations. The company has seen a significant increase, this is the part I wanted to say, in demand for direct mail services. Okay, that's pretty cool. The CEO said, "We're thrilled to see such a strong demand for our services from nonprofit organizations. We understand the importance of connecting with donors and supporters, and we are dedicated to helping nonprofit organizations achieve their fundraising engagement goals." So good for that. Good for you, expanding your production capabilities. So, yesterday's break even or calculating customer acquisition costs kind of flowed into lifetime value. And I wasn't too impressed with the calculations, so I looked up some more articles, and here's one from Clint Fontanella from HubSpot, and from last year, not too long ago, not even quite a year ago. And I found a whole bunch of them. I found about half a dozen recent articles, and I wasn't impressed with any of them. So let's look at this one, and I'll explain why. It's easier to sell an existing customer than it is to acquire a new one. That is not always true. I don't remember what the offer was, but I remember talking to my list broker about Sherry's Berries, I think is the name of the company, and they sold chocolate dipped strawberries. And I called the broker and I said, "Hey, how's that listed? I see it's big. It's like 2 million or 3 million names." And he said, "A lot of people try it. Nobody continues with it." I said, "Why do you think that is?" And he said, "Well, because Sherry's Berries is primarily a Valentine gift. They advertise a lot on talk radio and things, and a husband says, "Hey, my wife might like a box of chocolate dipped strawberries," and buys them, and they're good. I'm not a big fan of chocolate dipped strawberries. I prefer either chocolate or strawberries. I don't like them together, maybe. I'm not sure exactly why. But anyway, so that's this year's Valentine's gift. Um, and apparently, Sherry's Berries has found that it's easier and less expensive to generate like an impulse buy and new customers than it is to generate a second order. Now, I also did work with with I'm trying to think. They own the Garden Weasel, and the president of the company went off to a direct mail seminar and said, and they were telling everybody they should do a catalog. And so they also had Bonami Cleanser and Faultless Starch as brands that they owned. And so they did a little catalog of household cleaning products, and they had plenty of products, and it did real well. But they said, we try to rent the biggest list we have. We don't really, Bonami Starch or Faultless Starch and Bonami Cleanser don't really have a list because they're sold at the grocery store. So but we do have the Garden Weasel, which was a tool to weed your garden. It was a German product that was seen on TV mostly. And they said, we mail our catalog to that list and we don't get hardly any orders. It doesn't work at all. It's hard to, and in that case, they were trying to get a second order. And this phrase, "it's easier to sell to an existing customer than to acquire a new one," has often been used to justify line extension. That it's easier to sell a second product, a different product, to a company that has bought from you or to a customer that's bought from you. But it isn't always. Trout and Reese talk about in marketing warfare, talk about how your brain has slots in it and you keep the slots separate. And so when Levi's, I think it's Levi's, Levi's decided to go into khakis, they created the brand Dockers because they were a jean brand and they thought we'd do it a different way. And Dockers, of course, has become a legendary product. We use it in the generic sense. Lee Jeans decided that they would just make Lee khakis, which, of course, you can see how much traction they got. Nobody thinks of Lee as Dockers. You might buy them if they're on special or something. So sometimes it's easier to create a new category and get new customers for that category. I've seen this many, many, many times. Even with Cabela's, when we started, we thought that, most people who hunt also fish, and pretty much vice versa. Dick and Jim Cabela hunted and fished. And so we thought that most of their customers had hunted and fished. And it's probably true that they do. But when we actually looked at customers that bought hunting and fishing, it was a surprisingly small segment. I think it was between 5 and 10% of their file that bought both hunting and fishing. When I got started, I'd fished all my life. When I got started hunting, I bought my hunting gear from Cabela's, partly because they'd spent, like $500,000 with me. But I better get going here. But I knew how to. I didn't, the fishing lures from Cabela's were much more expensive, and I knew how to go into Walmart and buy some 67-cent poppers and catch plenty of bluegills with them. So I had a different view of Cabela's as a hunting supplier rather than a fishing supplier, where I could get I had plenty of options locally, and so it's just not that simple. Sometimes it's easier to get a new customer than it is to acquire an old one. But if you're a local business, you pretty much have to keep customers happy. So anyway, this article goes on in that vein, in that overly simplistic vein, and says that customer lifetime value, I call it LTV, is the total revenue a business can reasonably expect from a single customer account through the business relationship. Now, yesterday we talked about how most customer files have over 60%, over half of their file is one-time buyers. They've only bought once, they never came back, despite repeated remailings, emailings, and a beautiful website or a store. The actual data says that most customers, you could reasonably expect maybe 1.5 orders. That's a pretty good way to think of it, or probably more like 1.3 orders for every customer you have. And that's in the past. What about the future? Very difficult to say. Okay, so I don't agree with that one. But the bigger question, right, the longer the customer continues to purchase from a company, the greater their lifetime value becomes. Except that 60% doesn't really move. So looking at it this way, I just don't see much value in it. Why is it important? The longer the lifestyle, the more value. But what are you doing to do that? And they say tracking and improving. Well, tracking isn't the same as improving, and they don't really give you a lot of improvement. It allows you to identify the specific customers that contribute the most revenue. Well, you can do that anyway. You just sort your customers by life-to-date sales. You don't need any lifetime value. Because you're gonna service individuals. You just don't need this at all, and it doesn't do you any good, really. And yes, customer service is important, as I pointed out yesterday. Companies who think they can just cut customer service, all of your customer segments will shrink, no matter how long they've been with you. There's another theory of marketing that also is not well proven or documented, that the longer a customer's with you, the more loyal they'll be. Not really. Just imagine if you have a lifelong friend and you punch him in the nose. Will he still be your friend? Probably not. Doesn't matter. You do bad things to your customers, they'll leave. Okay, so anyway, we'll page over to this one. This is from a guy named John Miglosh. What a name. How do you pronounce that? I used to be a columnist for DM News, till they edited one of my articles into nonsense. Literally, they gave me a word count. I wrote to the word count, and then they cut another 25%, 30% of it. And it just didn't make any sense. I said, there's two kinds of customers, ones who depend on a local trading area and ones who don't, who have a national trading area or whatever. So the article stopped with the local, and it didn't even get to the point. Editors don't always understand the point of an article, and that's very, very dangerous. So direct marketing is, however, built almost universally on the principle of getting and keeping customers. Okay, most of the time we want our customers to come back. Okay, and so in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a big emphasis on this customer lifetime value. And it was really codified by Martin Bear. And yesterday I said Old Dominion, but I think he was from Old American Life Insurance Company in Kansas City. And feel free to correct me on that. But anyway, Martin came up with the idea that we shouldn't just look at our immediate purchases, but we should look at subsequent payments in term life, because they go on for a long time. And in term life, we know that the customer either keeps paying and tells you what policy number they're paying for, or you cancel them, or they die and they get the benefits. And then someone else tells you they're dead now, pay us the money. The beneficiaries. So in either case, when they stop, and there's a definite time when they stop. Okay. And furthermore, in life insurance, in term life, there's no incentive of the term life company to get you to renew and pay until the day you die, because the benefit will be larger than what you paid, because they hopefully invested it, and also all the people that quit, they got to keep the money. Okay, so if you make it to dying, you make out really well as an investment. Otherwise, not so much. It's all down the drain, but it gave you peace of mind. right? Okay, so this curve, the life insurance company does nothing. You don't get a mailing from your life insurance company saying, "We hope you keep it till the day you die." We just don't do that. Okay, so it doesn't directly apply to a catalog company or a .com or a e-commerce company that wants repeat orders, right? The one truth about that previous article was we do want repeat orders. Okay, um, and I'm not going to really dispute 80% of your sales come from 20% of your customers. I agree with that, right? The question is, what do you do with the other 80% of your customers, right? So direct marketing, direct mail especially, employs tracking codes, which let us track orders to the promotions that produce them. Nowadays we don't do that as much. We still can, but mostly we use matchback analysis, which is a little dangerous because customers might have multiple addresses and multiple names, and it's you got to be a little loose with that tracking. One of our clients, we found that for every one order they got from their customers, they got 2 more orders from not customer addresses, from pass along, I think. And it gave them a 900% return on investment on their catalog when we applied that and loosened up the matchback a little, and we showed them the numbers either way. Okay. So tracking allows mailers to discern the profitability of their buyers compared with non-buyers. Okay. Traditional lifetime value originated in direct response life insurance industry. Yes. Okay. And that's that story. Okay. Traditional life insurance attribution has to be based on long-term trends. You want long-term trends so you can project revenue into the future. However, here's the problem. Any significant change in customer acquisition, retention, or reactivation programs will change the curve, limiting its application. Both internal and external factors of competition, economic strength, product quality, customer service can nullify the curve, right? So you build a curve based on the last 5 years. Can you, without fear, project that kind of revenue? Say, if we acquire 100,000 new customers, we can expect them to generate X. No, you can't, because the future is uncertain. Okay, you can to some extent, but you have to be very careful. Plus, you have to balance the profitability of subsequent customers with the cost of acquisition. Okay, and I highly recommend you read the entire article. It does touch on that the bathtub model, which we talked about yesterday, with where you can measure the level to measure the attrition. You can easily calculate the number of customers that came in from non-customer sources, from non-previous customer buyer sources, the house file. But it's difficult to decide how many of them aren't with you anymore because they could go dormant for a number of years. Or you could change your reactivation programs and it makes them look dormant, and then you start it up again and they look good. This is pretty much what a regular catalog company, this is how they think of it. Okay, the buyer file, and one of the important things, there's actual calculations in this article. We have real equations, and the real number we're after is profit. So we must apply a cost of goods multiplier. It's funny, the CFO at Cabela's said, well, we can't count this. We can't count this, your numbers, because you didn't use a cost of goods. I said, that's because you didn't give us the cost of goods. We asked for it several times and you wouldn't give it to us. So we plugged a number based on what Dick told us. It's funny how, the CFO will pick you apart if you're not careful. Anyway, but it doesn't really do you that much good to calculate revenue, average revenue per customer. That's not going to show you the segmentation. Okay. But what you really need to do is you need to create a profitability perspective on your customers. Okay. And you say, well, what's the cost of goods? What did it cost us what did that item that we sold them cost us to buy? Right. And next we subtract the mailing cost for that period. Not just that one, but you got to think about it in terms of how many times are you going to mail that person over that next 5 years, right? So you got to subtract that. Again, we're not interested in which buyers were mailed, but the total mailing cost. We just want the sort of overall, it doesn't have to get into the weeds. We want to say, well, what's the buyer file worth we're normally mailing this many pieces and they normally cost this amount of money and we're mailing them this many times a year. Let's think of it that way. I usually do 6 months periods because there's a lot of seasonality in this. Finally, we apply both the variable cost of order processing, picking, and shipping, and an overhead figure. Okay, and that always causes trouble. I tell people take your P&L for the last couple of years and figure out the average overhead, okay, and divide that for each year by the number of orders you processed. Okay, so you can take your rent and your electricity and all those things. Your CFO can boil that all down and probably has a 2-page P&L or something that sums it all up. And you take that general overhead. I don't think you need to take in taxes and interest on your loans and stuff, but you can if you want. You take all of that number, whatever's not cost of goods and marketing expense, and you divide by the number of orders, and you have a solid overhead per order. It might be a lot bigger number than you think. Now, in here, I say the buyers cover fixed expenses. Jack Miller at Quill Corporation, the founder of Quill Corporation, and I actually built a case study and presented it at the DMA and was the #1 rated presentation at a fall DMA, which used to be a big deal. And probably, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 presentations over the course of about 3 or 4 days. Anyway, ours was the top one. And Jack taught me that it's possible you can take that overhead number and just apply it to the buyer, you can take it, apply it to all the orders, but basically just charge the buyers for the overhead, and then you only can divide it by the number of buyers, by the number of buyer orders. But anyway, he argued that that the buyers pay for the overhead, and that allowed him to understate the cost of acquisition without including the overhead per order for the new customers. And so it allowed him to shift a little bit more of the money to acquisition, which is brilliant. That's how he grew as fast and as big as he did. Okay, and he managed to make it work. Okay, so all these things to keep in mind, but it will impress your CFO. And if you haven't got this for your company, you really ought to. And so what we do is we take 5-year history of your profitability, and we basically assign the profitability to your buyers, your house file, and the loss. These are losses. The house file, we want to mail deep enough, and a lot of times we'll do the house file is, everything beyond 24-month buyers. Might be leads, it might be ship tos if you're in business to business. It's everything that isn't your main hotline buyer file, which is usually your 0 to 24-month file. So the 0 to 24-month file, like Andrew says, is very profitable. The rest of your buyer file is not very profitable. We can also optimize that curve if we look at mailing results on an individual drop-by-drop basis. But anyway, assuming you have some idea what you're doing, the house file, your goal is to sort of break even, and then your acquisition loses money. And what you have to do is you have to balance these two and make sure you make money over time, right? But by calculating this in terms of variables for the past 5 years, you can project what the optimal ratio of acquisition to profitability, to milking the buyer file, and you can grow at your maximized rate. You can actually optimize through time. Not many people have done this. I probably should have worked harder to get this out in the industry, and then we wouldn't have such silly articles being published over and over and over telling you that lifetime value is just the average value times the average time. Nonsense. Have a great day. Like and share. I hope you learned something. Share it. Your friends will know you're smart. Bye-bye.